And of course, doctors may have that stigma themselves. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that Duncan ASMR.
This is a New England podcast.
Yes. Everywhere else, fuck off.
Fuck off.
Oh my god,
If you don't drink iced Dunkin' in the middle of winter, I don't want to talk to you.
I don't want to talk to
I
you.
don't know you.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Content notices for this episode include transphobia and explicit mentions of medical stuff and body parts. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rule 63 podcast. This is Anna Marie. I use she, her, hers pronouns.
I'm Danny. I use he series and they series pronouns.
We're doing it. We're doing the podcast.
We're doing it. And you know what? It's going to be better than the last two.
I hope so. Today we have a real topic.
We do have a real topic instead of going through a questionnaire together.
Yes. So I was invited this past week to give or facilitate a discussion on trans health.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited to the Yukon Global Health Symposium. This is the third year that they've done the health symposium. It's kind of like an undergrad run thing. It's like a conference/symposium thing where people come and present and do Q&As and whatever. It's a conference type thing,
yeah.
A mini conference at Yukon, a university. And the theme of this year was gatekeeping,
mm-hmm.
or medical gatekeeping. So like access to healthcare worldwide.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long they've been planning this, but literally this past week, I got an email from my friend
mm-hmm.
who was already like planned to be a presenter and interviewer. He forwarded me an email that was like, hey, there's going to be a breakout session in this like discussion series about like trans health. And they were wondering if you would want to participate, because they were trying to find someone with experience in the LGBTQ community. And I guess they thought pretty last minute about getting rid of real trans, which is fine, you know? I mean, well, it's not fine, but
at least they tried to resolve it.
We're not going to dunk on them here, because they did find me.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. And
they did have the moment where they went, oh,
yeah.
Okay. Mistakes have been made.
Yes. And they did a decent job at sort of summarizing. Of course, my experience is, of course, valuable, and your experience is valuable as well.
Neat.
So because it's on my mind,
yeah,
we are going to talk about that.
Okay. We're going to do it.
We're going to do it because it's our podcast and we can do what we want.
Oh, I thought of a second topic I have for this. We were planning beforehand. And I'm like, oh, shit, I actually have things to say about this, because I don't think about it until we're here.
Yeah. Towards the beginning, I was like, oh man, I'll start like taking notes and stuff throughout the week. Lately, it's been more of a,
you know what?
Danny shows up at my house, and I'm like, all right, we got to think of something to do. It's more towards that end. But as I outlined in episode 2, when we talked about our transition stories, there's generally the sort of, I break it down into break down transitioning into social, legal, and medical aspects. Social being coming out, personal things. Legal being like changing documents. Medical being like access to hormones, surgeries. It should be said right off the bat that if you don't want to do medical things, surgeries, hormones, etc., you're still valid. Your trans identity is still valid. You don't need any of that to be trans and be valid. The only thing you need to...
You don't need to do any of the things.
You don't need to do anything.
You don't need to do shit.
The only thing you need to do to be valid is subscribe to Rule 63 on iTunes.
That's
and follow us on Spotify.
But if you don't, you're a trender. So.
Oh my god. Off the bat, content warnings for...
Oops.
That's why we write these things down. That's why we write these things.
Content notice thing.
For transphobia, we'll think of things. Obviously, we're going to be having semi-frank discussions about body parts. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any initial thoughts?
Medical gatekeeping is bad.
All right, tune in
That's
next time.
Well, so here's the thing with like medical gatekeeping is that
give me the tea.
Getting
Take your time.
getting like government health insurance would be great. However,
okay.
Have you paid attention to trans people in the UK?
Kind of.
It takes like 2 years to get the first appointment. This is like the breadlines argument, but it's my fear.
Yeah. I know, like, this is the argument, like, oh, if you get universal health care, the long lines in Canada, blah, 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 which is, like, not 100% real, but it's a little bit real.
But it's a little bit real. Well, it's also, it means that, like, it's the problem with all the government stuff is that it means that, like, now trans healthcare is even more in the hands of the government. I immediately took this out of the topic we were talking about.
No, that's fair. All these things are important because if you're talking about... like,
and they're all connected.
They're all connected. Broadly speaking, you know.
And people who have more money just immediately have less gatekeeping because they don't have to convince insurances that they're trans, so they just have to convince doctors. And there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily aren't going to be super hard to convince doctors. I don't know. And I'm doing informed consent HRT.
Right.
Which is great.
So what are the different channels to get HRT?
So it is Anna. Basically it is either informed consent or you do like the whole a therapist decides you need it and then you go to endocrinologist. I forgot what they were called. So informed consent model means that you go somewhere and you sign a paper and they give you hormones, and then usually you just have to go back and they have to look at your blood to make sure they aren't killing you, and then they'll give you more.
Right.
So you don't have to pass any sort of test besides them, like a doctor seeing you, thinking you're in your right mind, and you signing a paper. So it's fully your decision. However, not necessarily, that won't necessarily get you covered under your insurance.
You also have to...
I do.
Yeah. Do you have to, like, pick dosages yourself completely?
No, they scale you up.
Yeah, so they will give you guidance on that sort of thing.
There are medical guidelines for HRT, trans HRT now. So, even people who don't necessarily, like, have experience in that have, like, they know what to do for you.
Yeah.
You know, like Planned Parenthood, I went to one, because that's where I started getting it. I went to one, and this woman had, like, the binder of stuff because her Planned Parenthood just started doing it, so she had, like, all the information about how to give it to me and not kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I played the long game.
Yeah, you did it the other way.
The other way, which was going through and getting approval to go to an endocrinologist.
Yeah.
So to give you a rough timeline, how quick were you able to, like, walk into a clinic and then the timeline for starting HRT?
It was a very though I did it in Massachusetts, so where I was, the Planned Parenthood was just a lot more busy than the one I go to in Connecticut. So it took a couple months to just book an appointment, but I booked an appointment. They drew my blood. They saw that I wasn't, like, at high risk for anything bad happening to me, and they prescribed me testosterone. So as soon as I could have an appointment, I basically had a prescription.
Okay, got it. I, again, played the long game. I started seeing a therapist for, you know, being trans and all that in the spring of 2018. Towards the end of summer, I said, okay, I think hormones are right for me, and I got my therapist to write me a letter. And then from her sending off a letter to Middlesex Hospital, which is the endocrinologist that I go to. What was the timeline? I think maybe 3 or 4 months, just because they were so busy.
Yeah.
To give you a rough idea, in Connecticut, which is generally considered to be one of the more progressive states in terms of like trans healthcare access and trans rights generally, of the 127 endocrinologists in Connecticut, 2 do HRT.
But Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, which is Connecticut's Planned Parenthood,
Yes.
does informed consent HRT.
Yes, this is true.
They didn't at the time that you were doing this.
This is correct.
This is new.
Like, don't make me feel like a fucking idiot
No, I'm
in
not
front of our
attacking
audience,
you.
in front of our subscriber.
In front of our good friend.
And that first appointment wasn't even, handing off the pills or whatever.
Yeah.
It was an appointment to, a consultation.
Yeah.
And then they had to do a blood test,
Yeah.
and then I had to come back in a few months to sort of follow up, and then I get the drugs. So that's a several month waiting time, and you could say that is just like, booking appointments because the hospital is busy. But at one point during one of my regular appointments, which happen every 3 to 5 months,
Yeah.
I asked, what's the deal with like the wait times and all of that? Is it a demand thing? And my endocrinologist said it's definitely not a demand thing. There's an overwhelming demand for just these 2 endocrinologists.
Yeah.
Because they're the only ones that provide it, and there are so many people that need it.
Yeah.
So it's completely a stigma thing
Yeah.
about doctors not wanting on to sign on to
Yeah.
give out HRT because that's a political decision and it might
Yeah.
conflict with their beliefs. And that's why these laws that are popping up in several states about like doctors being able to refuse service depending on their religious beliefs can be so harmful.
Yeah. Which is great because HRT is like extremely straightforward.
Yes.
Like you're not
yeah.
really gonna get hurt by it.
Oh, sure. I mean, obviously, look up the risks and make an informed decision if you're, like, young and listening to
Well,
this.
in terms of, like, as a doctor and, like, the risk you're taking on, what you're taking on risk is that, like, somebody's having permanent, like, changes to their body. So, like, obviously, there's always risk of, like, patients complaining about things and whatever. But, like, beyond that, it's, like, you start on a low dose, make sure their, like, body doesn't freak out and scale it up and just, like, take blood draws.
Yeah.
And congratulations, it's fine.
Yeah, no, there's all these scares about, like, what hormone will do to your body.
But we know pretty, like, well.
Yeah, it's been studied for decades, and my therapist actually reminded me of something important when I was asking about estrogen. Half the planet is on estrogen, and they're doing fine. Like, they're not doing great, but they're doing fine. And it's not because of the
the estrogen,
estradiol or anything.
It's like, on one hand, we know plenty about hormones, and like we can all calm down. But also on the other hand, we need to do more research on like for trans people, for medical stuff,
trans people,
for medical stuff, because we just like don't know all the things because we don't have long form studies. Form.
Like long-standing studies. That's why if you're a trans person, the best thing to do to help out other trans people in the future is to participate in studies.
Yeah.
Yay. Praxis. Action items. But yeah, that's just Connecticut. I've heard of people.
And Connecticut's pretty good.
And Connecticut's good.
And Connecticut.
So we're talking several months.
Connecticut insurance has to cover.
State insurance, you mean? Because I know
insurance is based in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
insurance has to follow the laws of the state where they're based.
Yes, and I also know that my university does provide HRT in their healthcare plan, their insurance plan, which is baller. In fact, UConn is starting up its own transgender health clinic, which is freaking awesome. What else is there to say about Connecticut? I do know a couple of friends volunteered their stories of like transitioning in other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend from South Carolina who had to commute to Georgia for weekends at a time for the several years that they lived there. And that was fucking rough because they had to take time off work and school to go to fucking Atlanta for a few days at a time.
Wow.
Which, again, for me at least,
and also that's
checkup appointments every like 3 to 5 months or so.
And that's a money access problem too.
Absolutely. the other whole side of this is if you can't take time off work to go to therapy appointments or pay for therapy appointments for that matter, and take off time work and pay for these consistent every few months appointments, or hormones are pretty cheap these days, but still, then you're basically fucked.
Yeah. And, like, pretty cheap is still comparative to other medication, not like...
Mm-hmm.
Because I spend $50 at least, probably more a month, and, like, plenty of people can't do that.
Oh, yeah. Just asking someone to pay an additional $50 a month, like, some people literally can't.
Yeah.
How exhausting.
How exhausting.
But those are just the sort of, like, getting hormones and things.
Yeah.
Which not everyone decides to do, but a lot of people decide to do. So making those more accessible and studying them more precisely will make it better for trans people down the line.
Yeah.
The other element of this is surgery.
Yes, which is a whole
I've not had any of that, but it's a whole process. I've heard stories. Would you mind sharing your story?
Yeah. So I will, but also I did not get my surgery in any way in a trans related.
Yeah, that's an interesting element, that too.
I got a breast reduction surgery because my boobs were too goddamn big.
So you obviously wanted to reduce the size of your breast to relieve dysphoria, but
also they were just too much. And, like, for, like, just in terms of, like, buying clothes was a fucking pain in the ass because of it. And, I was getting back pain.
Yeah.
So I couldn't stand for, like, a half hour at a time. I could not stand. So that was rough.
That's brutal.
So, I went to the doctor and was like, hello. Help. And what I had to do for my insurance to pay for the breast reduction was go to the doctor, have her refer me to a physical therapist, do physical therapy for a couple of months, have the physical therapist write a letter that's basically like, it's not getting better and you should just get surgery, and then go to the surgeon who I had a consultation with, and then a couple months later I had a surgery. And then my insurance paid for it.
You didn't just walk in and say, hello, ow, help, please.
Owie.
There was a multi-month process, and you didn't even go...
So here's the thing, is I could, but unlike with trans top surgery, I could have walked into the plastic surgeon and said, I want a breast reduction, and she would have given it to me, and, like, not required anything, and I would have had to pay for it outright, but could have done it. With trans top surgery, a lot of surgeons themselves, not just the insurance, the surgeons require a letter from a therapist saying that you need top surgery because they don't want to, like, get any shit about it.
Yeah, so it's the same procedure.
Yeah.
It's just that if you're doing it because of dysphoria reasons, it's an extra step. But if you're just going in there like, hey, I just want this.
Yeah.
Without even necessarily a medical reason.
Yeah.
Although you had a medical reason of having back pain and things.
Yeah.
So that's fucked.
It is fucked up. It's pretty great.
Yeah. That's exhausting.
It's because doctors, like, need to protect their asses.
Yeah.
And they know that if, like, somebody walks in and asks for a breast reduction and it's like, fuck you, I didn't want that, nobody's gonna, like, give them money over it. But they're scared.
Yeah. Doctors are scared because of the stigma. And, of course, doctors may have that stigma themselves. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that Duncan ASMR.
This is a New England podcast.
Yes. Everywhere else, fuck off.
Fuck off.
Oh my god,
if you don't drink iced Duncan in the middle of winter, I don't want to talk to you.
I don't want to talk to you.
I don't know you.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
But that's a really interesting story. This is kind of a parallel. The example I give and the example that I did give to the cis people in the audience at my symposium was if you were, like, getting married, if this is for like for name changes, if you're getting married and you're a woman, you could do all the name change stuff for free.
Yeah.
You have to like wait in line and stuff. But if you're trans, you need to go to court and shell out $300 for the court doc, the $30 for the DL, $100 for a passport. And the only difference there is that it's socially a norm.
Yeah.
To change your name if you're a woman getting married.
So they have accommodated it.
So they've chosen to accommodate it. Whereas it could be a social norm to change your name as a trans person. That could be a recognized thing.
Yeah.
And there's also arguably even a medical reason why you want to change your name because of dysphoria reasons.
Yeah.
So there's even more reason. And yet I had to pay a lot of money. That's one of the things I brought up to the symposium, and that was one of the things that like actually made people jump out of their seats in shock. Like, oh wow, it takes so much fucking money just to do something as simple as change your name.
And I also would like to note, because we've been sort of like talking about it but haven't explicitly said, is that being trans is not a medical condition. Dysphoria is a like medical symptom, and if you're trans and have dysphoria, you have gender dysphoria disorder, and the dysphoria is like the health condition bit.
Yes.
Just like depression is like the feeling bad is the medical bit.
Yeah, no. I also don't think we should necessarily pathologize the trans experience and medicalize it entirely, but this was a symposium for mental health professionals. And I opened with, hey, this is my experience of transitioning. If you ask 4 different trans people what it means to transition, they'll give you 5 different answers. It's a much more like personal, emotional experience, but this is a health symposium, so this is the medical definition. But keep in mind that it's not entirely a medical phenomenon, and that can even be at odds with how some trans and non-binary people understand themselves.
It's one of those things where it's like, I wouldn't call being trans a medical condition, but you have to be able to treat it like a medical condition in some circumstances.
Yes. Yeah, no.
It's just the best framework to work with.
Yeah.
In certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you just need to convince a doctor.
Yep.
You're convincing a doctor, you're convincing an insurance company.
Yeah.
To shell out money for a product.
Because it's also like, I don't know, we talk about it and like how people shouldn't have to like do all these gatekeeping things, but it's also like if insurance is paying for something, you always have to prove to insurance that you have the condition and that you need it.
It should be way easier.
How the capitalism works.
Yeah. And it should...
But there's also definitely a lot of gatekeeping specifically in trans stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
There's medical gatekeeping everywhere. It just happens to be worse for trans people.
Yeah. And like, I know people talk about in like their UK therapy sessions or whatever, in their UK therapy sessions, people in the UK who go to the NHS for gender stuff to get a therapist to say, yes, you can now have stuff, have to like present very, very binary and very, very like gung-ho convinced, like have to be really the right type of trans.
Right.
I've heard a lot of people talking about like that experience, and I know it happens. I've specifically heard it in that context because people have been talking about that on Twitter for like 500 years. Because the NHS sucks, I guess. This is what I hear from the UK.
Yeah, this just in from across the pond.
The NHS sucks.
For this, anyway. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about... I've heard it's great for other things. Anyway.
It's not being true.
I don't care.
No, it's a valuable experience, because...
But, yeah, and it's like, I know that that's true also in the States, and I think perhaps in the States it's more a toss-up of, like, what doctor you get.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, if you have a very, like, loose therapist who'll write you a letter
My therapist
whenever...
did not give a shit.
Well, that's very good.
I was like, yo, I'm a trans, and she was like, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, my therapist would have written me a letter in just, like, 3 or 4 sessions, because I have a particularly good one, or one who knows the experience very well. you could get locked up for as long as 2 years
Yeah.
if you have a more conservative, quote unquote, conservative
And
therapist.
being trans gets you gatekeeped in healthcare that has nothing to do with being trans.
Let's delve into that a little more, Danny.
I went to a psychiatrist.
Tell me about it.
I asked if perhaps I had a particular condition that I do not want to get into. And she was like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. But she kind of ignored me.
Ouch.
But the type of medication that you would prescribe for this condition is not necessarily something that you like want to be tossing around, but it's a pretty normal medication that like a pretty large amount of people are on. So it's not like some like obscure thing or whatever. And she's just like, I'm going to give you this instead because I just don't know, with like the hormones and everything. And I'm just like,
With
what?
the hormones, is she talking about like chemical interactions or just like as a person being emotional?
It's like that I'm on hormones. So it's like, oh, we don't want to play around with your medication when you're on hormones. And I'm like, what?
There's a name for this, Danny. Do you know what it is? It's called trans broken arm syndrome.
There's a name for it?
There's a name for it. You can go home and Google it or Google it whenever. But if you Google it, it's a phenomenon where, like, I think there was a case where someone showed up to the doctor or the hospital with a broken arm, and they were worried about, like, what to do because this person was on HRT.
I'm just like, you prescribe, like, I've had my blood work, so we know I'm like any random cis man.
Yeah.
Maybe slightly less than any random cis man, but whatever. And I 100% guarantee you that you prescribe this to cis men. 100%. Promise you that. What do you think is gonna happen?
For the record, there is basically no concern over a special interaction. Again, I asked this to my therapist. Half the world is on estrogen, half the world is on testosterone. There's nothing special about being trans and being on estrogen.
Yeah. You're not gonna
being trans and being on testosterone.
The only thing you have to that you have to worry about is your risks of certain diseases shift into the other population risk.
Yes.
So just to remember to pay attention to perhaps different things than you were told to pay attention to growing up, and it doesn't like your primary sex characteristics.
Yeah.
Like a lot of trans men eventually need is a strong word, but that a hysterectomy because after a while your uterus isn't happy about being on testosterone.
And is that similar with the breast cancer risk for trans women? It can happen.
Yeah.
Technically, so.
And so cancer risks like that go down for trans men, but then have higher rates of heart disease.
Yeah.
And then your rates of heart disease go down, but you get higher risk of breast cancer.
It's also a trade-off.
A thing where a lot of those things are talked about as 100% increase in risk, but 100% increase in risk over a 0.5 risk is a 1% risk.
Yes.
So it's you need to know what you're working with to start off. You can't just say 100% and panic now it's super high.
Yeah. That's the kind of transphobe rhetoric. Oh, we don't know what these hormones do. We don't know what the risks are.
We know a lot of what they do.
We know a lot about the risks of breast cancer broadly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
It's, stay safe, do as much research as you can, check your genetic background, your family history. Again, it's all the same as being cis.
There's there's a couple of things trans men's uteruses sometimes aren't happy, and we haven't really done studies on how testosterone is affecting it and stuff like that. But I don't like saying most. A lot of trans men are going to get a hysterectomy anyway. So it's not I don't know.
You
I
only
just don't
really-
care about my uterus. Your two problems are your boobs and your uterizes.
Yes. Uterizes? I just
You
took me a
just
second
went with it.
to process that, and I was like, yeah, but wait a second.
You can tell when I start talking out my ass because I start saying most, and then, well, actually, maybe not.
Most, well, no, nuance. Nuance is tough. The only two big things that have happened to me is my alcohol tolerance is lower now,
Yeah.
and I get cold now.
I don't get cold. I get so hot.
Fuck you.
I went out the other day in like 40-degree weather, and I was like, this is why teenage boys are like this. It's warm outside.
Yeah, I used to never have a problem in my lab for the first year of my PhD, and then, my testosterone went away.
I used to keep,
as it does.
I used to keep my apartment in Massachusetts at 72 degrees. I now keep my apartment at like 67 degrees.
I keep mine at 72. We switched. Aw.
I also get angry. I get sweaty when I'm mad.
It's almost like this is the theme of our podcast. I love us so much.
We're so much. Unbelievable.
Another thing they talked about in the talk was just like not even related to hormones or surgeries or anything, but again going to the topic of like other areas of care. They're not even related to transitioning that trans people face. Is just like forms and legal stuff.
Yeah.
So like having hospitals like have a form for like name and preferred pronouns rather.
It would be so easy for hospitals to be more trans friendly.
But instead it's like, oh, you have this one box for M or F.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And the doctor just look at the chart, call it a name. And it would take just so little effort to just have that extra little box.
Yeah.
That'll be good for everyone with like a nickname, or everyone, and also especially trans and non-binary people.
What drives me absolutely nuts?
What drives you absolutely nuts, Danny?
Going to a CVS pharmacy. I don't know why I specifically called out CVS.
Fuck CVS.
No.
Well, not necessarily.
No, we're
pro CVS here.
We're pro CVS at this household.
Imagine going to Walgreens.
Yeah, fuck Walgreens. And I'm getting testosterone in syringes, and the person is handing these things to me and is like, will that be all, ma'am? And I'm like, you're stupid.
You're so dumb.
Use your brain.
Have you
I'm begging you.
heard of a trans person in your life? You're a pharmacist.
No, I shouldn't do that.
Okay.
I was gonna tell Kyle's work stories, but I'm like, that might be going a little too far.
What do pharmacy majors learn about the trans experience?
Not enough.
Okay.
He was telling me that he
Danny's fiance.
Yes. He is a pharmacy. Mm-hmm. He is a pharmacy.
He is. He sure is.
Yeah, he said that like they talked about it for like 2 seconds basically, and that he ended up like telling one of his professors a bunch of shit about how trans people work.
An ally. An ally.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was at UConn Pharmacy School.
But UConn, at least some of UConn pharmacy staff is very supportive of the idea of being better about trans people. But they have not enacted this.
Yes. There's a difference between being like, we should do something, and translating that into action and real things. And
I might bully Kyle into bullying them into...
That's a good idea. I'm still at UConn, so I could...
You are.
Could have a play in this.
We can...
I think there's someone...
We can do things.
We can do things. We can do things. with all of these things.
And Kyle's in contact with at least one of his professors. So.
Yeah. I also know one of the students. I'm pretty sure there's a student from pharmacy who signed up for my career science thing, so I can get in touch with them and see what we can do in the department.
Yeah.
I know I'm having a discussion with the chemical engineering department and other people to like how to make econ more trans affirming. But anyway, the lesson of the day is all of these things are at first depressing, but all of these things can change with education, advocacy, allies, and action.
I told Kyle that that's my least favorite thing in CVS, and he said that he's been like aggressively gendering trans people right when they come to CVS.
Hello, sir. Looking you in the eye.
Hello, ma'am.
Ma'am.
That almost seems passive aggressive.
I'm sure he can do it better than I.
Yeah, have you heard his customer service voice?
Oh yeah, it's a really stark upsetting contrast between your fiance and your fiance's customer service voice.
Kyle's
it's
incredibly
worlds.
fake.
Kyle's so fake. He is such a good liar.
It's awful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about this topic generally?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, probably.
We'll think of something.
Not right now.
We're almost definitely going to think of something literally minutes after the thing closes. But
that's what always happens.
That's what always happens. It's fine. We're going to close out the discussion for today.
Okay.
Remember that through action and advocacy, you can change the world. And by working together, we can change the world together. This is my spitballing inspirational speech right now.
I noticed.
I'm getting better at these.
Did that help?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you are so fucking valid.
So goddamn valid.
If you are pre-op, post-op, non-op, if you are not doing HRT, if you are awaiting HRT, there is a positive future for you. I went from... Actually, I posted this on my Twitter. March 7th, 2018, I posted a snap that was like, oh, I wish I could be out at work.
Also,
and saved that to my memories.
You had such beautiful Futch energy in that.
Thanks.
In that photo. I loved it.
It was me with really short hair,
yeah.
turtleneck and cardigan. And then I had saved a picture, or on March 7th, 2019.
Yeah.
I had saved a picture again to my Snapchat story that was like, that bitch had no idea how happy she would be. And me on March 7th, 2020 was giving this awesome symposium and sharing my story and educating people. And sharing my story has always been the most fulfilling thing for me.
Can't believe you've been trans for so long now.
Yeah, right? I think I have a very positive story. And the more we share positive stories and positive experiences, the less power is in the hands of transphobes who will say that we're all depressed maniacs.
Scare y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, I am a depressed maniac.
For different reasons, though.
It's unrelated.
Unrelated depressed maniac. I think it takes a certain kind of crazy to go into a graduate program. So we're definitely crazy. But, you know, that's besides the point. Thank you for listening to this episode of Rule 63 featuring Anna and Danny.
Featuring
the usual hosts for all these episodes so far. If you like what you heard, follow us on Spotify, subscribe on iTunes, and leave us a 5-star review there. And follow me on Twitter, that Anna Marie.
And follow me on Twitter.
I've been very big on the Twitter these days.
I've you really know how to use specific social media platforms, but it's very uncomfortable when I'm like watching my friend be an influencer.
Thank you for that.
I'm like, this is a weird personality. I feel like I'm now developing a separate parasocial relationship with this person.
with Anna Marie, my Twitter,
yeah.
my curated social media persona.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we're friends.
Yes.
And you can be friends with both me and my curated social media persona if you want.
Great.
They're not that different.
I tweeted at your photo yesterday that you posted, yesterday or whatever day.
Whatever day.
And I wrote the tweet and I wrote you're so fucking hot or whatever in it. And then I was like, I sat there and I looked at it and then I deleted fucking and I was like, this is Anna's professional Twitter.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yes. I did my best. You're welcome.
I, of course, am comfortable with a little teensy bit of swearing, but not that much.
Not that much. Not the hard F-bomb.
Try to avoid it. Anyway, thank you for listening. I already did the call to action.
Already done.
Have a pleasant day, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.